How much technology in the government is 1950s, 1960s? If I wanted to go see punch cards, could I find them? If I wanted to see magnetic tape, could I find them?
I saw magnetic tape today in Silicon Valley. I went to the U.S. Geological Survey. There's all the earthquake monitoring. They had a magnetic tape, one machine that read the old 1970s magnetic tapes on earthquake data that they had, and they're working through, like, taking all the tapes, digitizing them in the modern format, which was great to see. I didn't think the COBOL class I took in college was coming so handy as it now does when talking to the Social Security Administration. There is still COBOL out there. It's amazing. And so it exists. But our goal is to do lots of things to drive innovation across government. And I think the taking and promoting a notion with Congress and others that we can't just ignore kind of the operating expense and only focus on kind of new delivery. We also need to go back and sort of have an effort to modernize the percentage of stuff we do. Over 50%, slightly over 50% of the federal spend is on operations and maintenance. It's not apples to apples, and the data is sort of soft because certain agencies, do new development in their maintenance context, and some do, maintenance in the kind of new development category as well. So it's not tagged and all that. But I would say the general sense is about 57% or so is operations and maintenance. And I think we have an opportunity to one optimize that a little bit. And I think data center consolidation and doing these efforts is one way, and then driving a different model into looking at things like shared first policy or the future first policy to drive kind of more agile development will get us on a pace of innovation, because a lot of times getting over the hump of these existing systems is such a capital expense that you can't justify it, and so you need to break it down into pieces and kind of attack it from that angle. And I think we have an opportunity to do that. We're attempting to do that right now there's a very big or there's actually a very disparate set of technologies that make up a federal acquisition systems, and we have an initiative going to actually consolidate those into a single system that's based on modular design, web services, cloud-based, and all that. And I think we'll not only make life better for the agencies that use and do acquisition, and we'll promote our shared first, but also will be easier for the vendor community to kind of plug into and think about things.
How siloed is the government information community? Does each agency live in its own world and have no sense of how the guys in defense or Social Security or anywhere else do it? And what can you do culturally to try and get people talking and sharing best practices?
I'd say that's one area in talking to, and I've gone around and met with all the major CIOs, and I went through all the CIOs and been in the job 2.5 months, is that's an area that my predecessor and the kind of culture shift that the president brought on has really changed in the last 2 years. We have something called the CIO Council that meets on a very regular basis to sit down. It's one of the first meetings I had was with my fellow CIOs to talk about the opportunities ahead of us and what we do. There's a best practices subcommittee that's got a inside government set of tools to share best practices, and then we also will do big events. The last one was actually really, really good, where we call on the vendor community to come in. We get up in panel form and talk about our challenges and ask the vendor community to just generate white papers for us that have real world, practical deliverables on how we can solve these problems. We're looking to the private sector for advice on vendor management, investment review, technology implementation, cybersecurity, lots of different things to kind of pull from there.
So you look at other countries' governmental IT efforts. You referenced global competitiveness as your closest equivalent to market competition. Who do you see out there where you go, you know what, we can learn from that?
Yeah, the two big ones that I'm paying really close attention to right now is Canada. Just went through an effort that they're launching this month, but we'll see how the outcome is. Canada just launched something called Shared Services Canada, where they took basically IT capabilities across their different federal agencies and put them into one agency. It's an 8,000 person agency that will basically run IT, line of business like HR systems, financial management, payroll, things like that in one singular agency. It's an interesting experiment. I'm glad they're doing it so we can watch and see what happens. Because I think distributed actually is a good model too, because it creates vibrancy in a way that a consolidated way, consolidated agency wouldn't. And I think our model creates vibrancy in our marketplace in a way that we couldn't do that if we consolidated. And they're also 1/10 the size, generally, people spend and all that stuff. And so it's a little bit different from that perspective. So that's one I'm paying close attention to see how that goes. And I am on I have regular calls, and we actually do this sort of telepresence-like thing with CIOs of other countries where I talk to them about this. The other one's the UK, who's taking an approach kind of on my point around citizen engagement, citizen business engagement. The UK is taking all their websites and consolidating them to two, a citizen portal and a business portal. And I think that's an interesting notion to think about in the federal government. It's definitely something I think we could aspire to, and would really promote the outside looking in mentality versus the inside out mentality. And so I want to kind of get best practices there. I think we have the opportunity to actually set up some commodity infrastructure and do some experiments in that area. The Business USA stuff that I mentioned will be our first foray into that. And then I want to look at platform technologies that allow this. A lot of you know, like the NFL is one website. No matter which team you go to, it's actually one website, just a different instance of that website based on where you are. And so there's sort of a no wrong door policy in the NFL too. If you have a favorite team, you may be able to find your way to a different team to look at something.
And I certainly find it with labor and commerce, that's a division that made sense in 1920, but now you just want an economy portal.
Right, or small business administration and commerce in that intersection. And you have, as I mentioned, the 7 different agencies that do exporting, and how does that play in? There's definitely an opportunity here, I think, we for too long have kind of, relied on citizens to absorb that complexity, and really not been an enabler versus an inhibitor to getting stuff done with government. I think we can drive some efficiency that we don't have today.
I want to pick up on 2 more points you made and then open it up for questions, because we've got a lot of people with points that are of interest to you, and I want to give as many people as possible a chance.
Okay.
But let me just pick on 2. You'd mentioned, the government is a BlackBerry shop, and you were diplomatic about that. But if you wanted to hook up an iPhone, if you wanted to hook up an Android, could you do it, or is that just totally off limits right now?
There are agencies that are doing it. Depends on the agency, policy, the cyber aspects of it, ensuring that the technology is there. I think we have a little way to go working with the industry on device evolution to meet government needs. There are ways to make that work. The White House has a program right now where you can bring your own iPad in and run a Citrix client to get it to a virtualized desktop to get your email and all that sort of stuff. And that's because it keeps all the data on the back end, and I'm subject to the Presidential Records Act and everything, so I can't have local data on my own devices. But that's an example of one where it's a nice innovation. USAID is actually doing a great program. They have a 2-device policy that basically says you can have a laptop and a BlackBerry, or an iPad and some other device and things like that. So that's actually cutting down on a number of things where they're enabling more. They're standing up wireless in buildings and in the non-sort of secure areas. And then VA is also piloting right now an iPad program at their hospitals for their doctors. So they're actually walking around using some of the medical infrastructure to do patient management and other things on iPad. So it exists across government, but we don't have a mobile strategy. So I'm definitely, that's top of mind for me to work on a strategy that would give us scale efficiencies, call on the industry to drive device capabilities, and start to solve some of the problems and meet the opportunities that we have on the mobile front.
I would ask you a year from now, you have one?
I hope so.
Okay.
Judging on that.
I was intrigued by your point on security too, and I began to wonder, we all know the case for security, and we all know what happens when the security department is so assertive about its case that we're locked out of the devices we thought we were able to use. Are you, in the end, the usability advocate within this process? The one person who says, but are we ever going to be able to use it if we put in all of that? Is that a role that you welcome?
I think, much like the private sector, it's about risk mitigation. There's a certain line you draw on where do you put the risk line on the versus the benefit line on this stuff. I mean, a lot of the issues we've seen with cyber in the world have been either someone misplaced something, or someone digitally got broke into a system, or you have an insider threat where some employee unknowingly sticks a USB drive that has some malware on it or something, or does something else bad within an organization and has access to those things. I think that we have to have kind of a multi-factored approach to cybersecurity, but also one that leans to understanding the cyber capabilities. If we did everything to a cyber sense on our BlackBerry, I would be pulling out an RSA token and punching in a code. I'd maybe be sticking a card in the side of it to do multi-factor authentication and things like that. Thumbprint reader on it or something. Like the end, the sky's the limit on the number of the ways you could secure these things. I think there's a balance that we have the ability to strike that balance between the way we use what kind of information is where, what's the value of the device if you were to say lose it, leave it somewhere. The ability on many of these new smart devices to wipe them remotely, yes. The ability to kind of do a terminal client into the back end, so once you shut it off, it's kind of worthless to you. All those things are encouraging on the ability to have great usage. I think the broadband capabilities that are emerging in this country, and I definitely worked on when I helped on the National Broadband Plan at the FCC, are such that we could get some stuff done.